I'm Bob Canary, and I've been talking in this series about the life and times of the English sonnet. As a quick review, the sonnet came to England from Italy during the reign of Henry VIII, and it spent much of the Elizabethan age loving in vain an unattainable lady. Discouraged, it turned to God and religious sonnets, particularly in the 17th century. But flesh is weak, and today the sonnet discovers sex and has a love affair, which is my excuse for reading you a number of my favorite sonnets. Now, love affairs may begin innocently enough with mere dreams of temptation, where our amoral unconscious has us do things we would not do in life. And some such dreams are relatively innocent. Others, of course, are not. I'd like to illustrate the possibilities with sonnets by Seamus Heaney and Algernon Swinburne. Now, Seamus Heaney is an Irish poet, which is probably one reason why he is a favorite poet of President Biden. As some of you may remember Heaney from when he won the Nobel Prize in 1995, or you might have read his 1999 poetic translation of Beowulf, one of the best modern poetic renderings of that Anglo-Saxon epic. This sonnet is entitled A Dream of Jealousy, and it is addressed to his wife. Walking with you and another lady in wooded parkland, the whispering grass ran its fingers through our guessing silence, and the trees opened into a shady, unexpected clearing where we sat down. I think the candor of the light dismayed us. We talked about desire and being jealous, our conversation a loose single gown or a white picnic table spread out like a book of manners in the wilderness. Show me, I said to our companion, what I have much coveted, your breast's mauve star. And she consented. Oh, neither these verses nor my prudence, love, can heal your wounded stare. Now, you may have noticed that the rhymes here are often inexact. The use of partial rhymes, sometimes called half rhymes or near rhymes, is especially common in 20th and 21st century poetry, perhaps because of some poets' reluctance to be overly poetic. Look again at the rhymes of the last 6 lines. Now, all of the rhyming pairs, out, what, ness, verses, and star, stare, are partial rhymes. And the final rhyme of star with stare is a particular kind of partial rhyme called consonantal rhyme, in which the same or nearly the same consonants enclose different vowels. As dream misbehavior goes, Heaney's openly requesting to see a lady's nipples may seem pretty mild. The sonnet certainly has more fervid dreams, as in Swinburne's Love and Sleep. Swinburne is a Victorian poet who's never received quite the amount of respect accorded Tennyson or Browning, but I have to admit that I enjoy him more than his more reputable contemporaries. Swinburne's model was Shelley, and as a young man he shared Shelley's hatred of tyranny and of organized Christianity. He was also an unusually perceptive critic who recognized the greatness of Walt Whitman and of Baudelaire when few others did. More to the point at the moment, he seems to have had really fun dreams. Lying asleep between the strokes of night, I saw my love lean over my sad bed, pale as the duskiest lily's leaf or head, smooth-skinned and dark, with bare throat made to bite. Too wan for blushing and too warm for white, but perfect-colored without white or red. And her lips opened amorously and said, I wist not what, saving one word, delight. And all her face was honey to my mouth, and all her body pasture to mine eyes, the long lithe arms and hotter hands than fire, the quivering flanks, hair smelling of the south, the bright light feet, the splendid supple thighs, and glittering eyelids of my soul's desire. My father liked to recite some Swinburne poems aloud, but not this one, at least when I was around. Now, like most of the poems I'm reading today, I don't think it requires much explaining. But we might look at something technical. Swinburne, you notice, does not mind making his rhymes nice and obtrusive. That's what's called full rhyme. But one of the criticisms of his poetry has been that it is all too concerned with musical effects. This particular sonnet, however, does not have quite the amount of heavy alliteration often associated with Swinburne. Now, alliterative effects are really noticeable only in a few lines, like too wan for blushing and too warm for white, or the long lithe arms and hotter hands than fire. Now, in too warm for blushing and too warm for white, 3 of the heavy beats of the line are W sounds. In the long lithe arms and hotter hands than fire, the repeated sounds are even more obvious because they are so close to each other. When you read a poet like Swinburne for yourself, or really any poet, you need to pay attention to such patterns of sound. It's actually a good sign if your lips move when you are reading poetry. Well, dreams like those of Swinburne might well drive the sonnet to seek out the partner of its dreams. And let's suppose that the sonnet does so and succeeds. For some possible reactions to the ensuing night of love, let's look at some sonnets by 2 American poets from the years between World War I and World War II, E. Cummings and Edna St. Vincent Millay. Now, back in ancient times, the era of beatniks declaiming poetry to jazz in coffee houses, I did a little poetry and jazz in college myself, and I had a fellow reader who used to read Cummings' poems in a deep bass voice. And girls would swoon. For many readers of his work, Cummings is the modern love poet. He's also known for his rather eccentric approach to punctuation, which actually makes a lot of sense once one gets used to it. Now here's one of his sonnets, and I only wish I had a deep bass voice. I like my body when it is with your body. It is so quite new a thing. Muscles better and nerves more. I like your body. I like what it does. I like its hows. I like to feel the spine of your body and its bones and the trembling firm smoothness and which I will again and again and again kiss. I like kissing this and that of you. I like slowly stroking the shocking fuzz of your electric fur, and what as it comes over parting flesh, and eyes big love crumbs. And possibly I like the thrill of under me you so quite new. Just as she makes the poet feel quite new, this sonnet is trying to make us feel its sensations as new and freshly exciting. Now, the excitement here is definitely male. But what does the lady in question think? Now, since Dante and Petrarch, and even before, the sonnet tradition has more often than not emphasized a male point of view, but female voices are sometimes heard. And as, alas, we know, male self-satisfaction does not ensure that the lady is equally enthusiastic. And that's certainly the case in this sonnet by Edna St. Vincent Millay. I, being born a woman and distressed by all the needs and notions of my kind, am urged by your propinquity to find your person fair, and feel a certain zest to bear your body's weight upon my breast. So subtly is the fume of life designed to clarify the pulse and cloud the mind, and leave me once again undone, possessed. Think not for this, however, The poor treason of my stout blood against my staggering brain. I shall remember you with love, or season my scorn with pity. Let me make it plain. I find this frenzy insufficient reason for conversation when we meet again. Now, one might be tempted to read the first 8 lines along the lines of, poor little old me just couldn't resist you. But the last 6 lines should disabuse us of any such thoughts, along with setting the man straight on what she thinks of him. I can't help noting, by the way, that there are only 2 rhymes in the first 8 lines, the octave, and 2 rhymes in the last 6 lines, the sestet. It's a pure Petrarchan sonnet in form, but we've come a long way from Petrarch and his Laura. Millay was incredibly popular in the 1920s, and she continued to write excellent verse all of her life. Now, her many love affairs suggest that she did not always take a negative view of a night of love, as does this next sonnet. Love is not all. It is not meat, nor drink, nor slumber, nor a roof against the rain, nor yet a floating spar to men that sink and rise and sink and rise and sink again. Love cannot fill the thickened lung with breath, nor clean the blood, nor set the fractured bone. Yet many a man is making friends with death, even as I speak, for lack of love alone. It may well be that in a difficult hour, pinned down by pain and moaning for release, or nagged by want past resolution's power, I might be driven to sell your love for peace, or trade the memory of this night for food. It may well be. I do not think I would. Now, the first 8 lines remind us that love may not be essential to the life of the body, but lack of love can kill us even so. The last 6 lines admit that it is possible that in really desperate straits she might trade away the memory of this night of love. But she does not think she would. If both parties are thus satisfied with the initial occasion, it is likely that the sonnet will carry on an affair with its significant other. Now, the word affair suggests that these are illicit meetings, but they do continue to meet and to make love. Such furtive, adulterous meetings are suggested in this poem by John Berryman and another by Sherod Santos. Now, John Berryman himself was the son of a father who committed suicide while Berryman's mother was having an adulterous affair with Berryman's eventual stepfather. Berryman also committed suicide after a life marked by alcoholism, depression, and womanizing. He recorded a 1947 affair with a married neighbor in a sonnet sequence known as Sonnets to Chris. He didn't publish them at that point, rather than offend his wife at the time. But 20 years later, he evidently decided that they were too good to leave unpublished. Poets can be a bit ruthless about things like that. Berryman's dream songs are probably his best-known works, but I'm especially fond of these sonnets. In sonnet number 71, he and Chris meet in their special grove to enact their own rites of love. One Sunday morning, when the dawn priests were applying wafer and wine to the human wound, we laid ourselves to ourselves down. I'm afraid our vestments wanted, but Francis's friends were crying in the nave of pines, sun-satisfied, and flying subtle as angels about the barricade, boughs made over us, deep in a bed half made, needle soft, half the sea of our simultaneous dying. Death is the mother of beauty. Arise, O leaf, shivering with delight, we die to be well. Careless with sleepy love, so long unloving. What if our convalescence must be brief as we are, the matin meet the passing bell. About the pines our sister, wind, is moving. Now this poem may need just a bit of explanation, although the main action is certainly clear enough. Death is the mother of beauty is a quotation from a famous poem by Wallace Stevens called Sunday Morning, which is probably why the line pops into the poet's head as he speaks of this Sunday with his lover. In church, priests may be giving communion, but Berryman and Chris have no vestments, and being naked in their grove, listening to St. Francis's friends, the birds. Dying is an old Elizabethan euphemism for sex, which explains our simultaneous dying. The communion the priests offer may help wounded souls heal. The lovers die to be well, though briefly, as the church bell that calls people to morning prayer is close to that which calls them to death. The wind is our sister, rather as the birds are Francis's friends. Lovers also meet beneath trees in Sherod Santos' sonnet, Married Love. Santos is a contemporary poet who has had fellowships from both the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts, and who has been a finalist for the National Book Award. And the chances are that you didn't recognize his name, that being too often the fate of contemporary poets. Here's the sonnet. As they sat and talked beneath the boundary trees in the abandoned park, neither one mentioning her husband or his wife, it seemed as though their summer shadows had detached themselves from the confusion of those 1,000 leaves. But no more than they could call their shadows back from the air could they ignore what they'd undone, and would undo once more that afternoon, before giving in to what they knew, had always known. And yet, in turning away, what they would say was not that thing, but something else, that mild excuse that lovers use of how things might have been had they met somewhere else, or in some better time. Were they less like themselves than what they are? What they've undone, and will undo once more, would be the vows they have sworn to their spouses. But they distract themselves of talking of how different things might have been, which is probably self-deception, or so the last line suggests. Were they less like themselves than what they are? Whether extramarital or not, love affairs most often end, leaving only memories, sometimes sad, sometimes not. Here are some sonnets about such remembered relationships by E. Cummings, W.B. Yeats, Chelsea Rathburn, and Edna St. Vincent Millay. The first up is another sonnet by E. Cummings, in which the poet awakens after a dream of a former lover. It is at moments after I have dreamed of the rare entertainment of your eyes, when, being full to fancy, I have deemed with your peculiar mouth my heart made wise. At moments when the glassy darkness holds the genuine apparition of your smile, it was through tears always, and silence molds such strangeness as was mine a little while. Moments when my once more illustrious arms are filled with fascination, when my breast wears the intolerant brightness of your charms. One pierced moment whiter than the rest. Turning from the tremendous lie of sleep, I watch the roses of the day grow deep. When the sonnet has such memories, helpful friends are not really helpful. You're better off without him, they say, or I saw her the other day and she's losing her looks. and, of course, you'll get over it. This next sonnet by William Butler Yeats reminds us of the folly of being comforted. Yeats, of course, was one of the 2 or 3 greatest poets in English of the 20th century, and one of those most responsible for the revival of the Celtic culture of Ireland. This sonnet, like many of his, is presumably about his muse, the Irish nationalist Maud Gonne, who married another and broke his heart. Yeats did eventually manage to sleep with her after she separated from her husband, but nothing much came of that. One that is ever kind said yesterday, "Your well-beloved's hair has threads of gray, and little shadows come about her eyes. Time can but make it easier to be wise, though now it seems impossible. And so all that you need is patience. Heart cries, 'No, I have not a crumb of comfort, not a grain.' Time can but make her beauty over again. Because of that great nobleness of hers, the fire that stirs about her when she stirs burns but more clearly. Oh, she had not these ways when all the wild summer was in her gaze. Oh, heart, if she'd but turn her head, you'd know the folly of being comforted." But the passion that leads to a relationship does not always survive its end, as in this next sonnet by a contemporary American poet, Chelsea Rathburn. The sonnet is called an English sonnet, both because it's about being reminded of a relationship from her time as a student in London, and because its rhyme scheme is that of the traditional English sonnet, also known as the Shakespearean sonnet, 3 quatrains of 2 rhymes each, and then a closing couplet. It may help to remember that London is just chock full of Indian restaurants and red buses. London returns in damp, fragmented flurries when I should be doing something else. A scrap of song, a pink scarf, and I'm back to curries and pub food, long wet walks without a map, bouts of bronchitis, a case of the flu, my half-hearted studies, and brooding thoughts and scanning faces in every bar for you. Those months come down to moments or small plots, like the bum on the tube, and rage that no one spoke, who raved and spat, the whole car thick with dread, only to ask, won't someone tell a joke? And this mouse of a woman offered, what's big and red and sits in the corner? A naughty bus. Not funny, I know, but neither is the story of us. I first found that sonnet about 15 years ago or so, when I decided to educate myself at my students' expense by teaching a course on contemporary American women poets. I like Rathburn's straightforward colloquial style. It's another way of writing poetry that does not insist on how poetic it is. Here's another Rathburn sonnet with a different kind of memory. It's called After Filing for Divorce. Your paperwork in, it's like the morning after a party, the shaken survey of damage, a waste of bottles where there was laughter. It all seems so much more than you can manage. The accusing cups and stubbed-out cigarettes, the sun assaulting the window, your throbbing head. It's not enough to face your own regrets, though they're coming back fast, the things you said, because someone's trailed bean dip across the table, and someone's ground salsa in the rug with his shoe. So you start to clean, as much as you are able, and think how far those hours have fled from you, before the hangover and your sour tongue, when you felt lovely and infinite and young. Let me close this little section with a sonnet in which the memories are less sad than wistful. It's by Edna St. Vincent Millay. What lips my lips have kissed, and where and why, I have forgotten, and what arms have lain under my head till morning. But the rain is full of ghosts tonight, that tap and sigh upon the glass and listen for reply. And in my heart there stirs a quiet pain for unremembered lads, that not again will turn to me at midnight with a cry. Thus in the winter stands the lonely tree, nor knows what birds have vanished one by one, yet knows its boughs more silent than before. I cannot say what loves have come and gone. I only know that summer sang in me a little while, that in me sings no more. But after all, not all love affairs end sadly, or end at all, and let us hope that the sonnet will find true love. So I want to end with a couple of pure love sonnets. Now, should our sonnet be a woman, I don't think there's a better voice for true love than Elizabeth Barrett Browning and her sonnet sequence, Sonnets from the Portuguese. Now, I think Elizabeth Barrett Browning doesn't get enough credit. When a little-known poet named Robert Browning first wrote his future wife to tell her how much he admired her work, she was already a very popular poet, at one point considered a possible poet laureate. But she was pretty much forgotten soon after her death, while Robert Browning is now ranked beside Tennyson as a major Victorian poet. Up through at least the 1930s, literary-minded undergraduates would meet in Browning societies to discuss his and other advanced works. And it seems quite unfair for her to be reduced to a mere appendage of his legend, when her long poems seem at least as readable as his. And it's also unfair that How Do I Love Thee, the one poem of hers which is still familiar, is almost too familiar, and so is treated as a sentimental hallmark verse. Now, I'm going to read it to you in hopes you might listen to it as if you'd never heard of it. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach, when feeling out of sight for the ends of being and ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely, as men strive for right. I love thee purely, as they turn from praise. I love thee with a passion put to use in my old griefs, and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seem to lose with my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life. And if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. And should our sonnet be a man, it only makes sense to go once more to E. Cummings. Here's another sonnet, less well known than How Do I Love Thee, but no less worthy. I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. I am never without it. Anywhere I go, you go, my dear. And whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling. I fear no fate, for you are my fate, my sweet. I want no world, for beautiful you are, my world, my true. And it's you are whatever a moon has always meant, and whatever a sun will always sing is you. Here's the deepest secret nobody knows. Here's the root of the root, and the bud of the bud, and the sky of a tree called life, which grows higher than soul can hope or mind can hide. And this is the wonder that's keeping the stars apart. I carry your heart. I carry it in my heart. My God, that you are whatever a moon has always meant, and whatever a sun will always sing is you. Don't you wish you'd said that, or had it said to you? Well, we certainly leave the sonnet a happy sonnet. In the meantime, I'm Bob Canary, and I'm a long-retired professor of English from the University of Wisconsin, Parkside. And my email is canary@uwp.edu. And I'd be glad to answer any questions about the sonnets for today, or, of course, to dispense advice to the lovelorn.